So good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, it's fine.
Felix. Good morning, everyone. Felix, sorry, Felix. So good morning if you're online as well. Welcome to day 2 of the JuliaEO 2025. It's going to be a really full day, quite exciting with different topics, large sessions mostly. We're going to start with cloud-optimized file formats. We're going to talk about data as well, big data in particular. Then we move more to the science part of things. We're going to talk about ice sheet and sea level. And then we're going to have a broader view of the system in terms of deriving knowledge from satellite data, so like a sort of an overview of things. We're going to talk about radar data as well. And mostly these are going to be quite long presentations today. We're starting with data formats. And we start with Martin Pronk. So Martin Pronk is a researcher at Daltares and an external PhD candidate at Delft University of Technology. He holds a MSc in Geomatics and BSc in Architecture, both from Delft University of Technology. His research concerns elevation modeling, especially in lowlands prone to coastal flooding. He aims to combine his interests in remote sensing and software engineering for societal impact. And he promotes open and reproducible research and is the author of several open source software packages for handling geospatial data. Written in Julia, his work often involves handling trillions of elevation measurements, requiring a careful selection and design of both spatial storage formats and processing algorithms. Currently, he works on applying data from ICESat-2, a LiDAR satellite, on global elevation models. Martin?
Thanks for that nice introduction. Cool, this seems to work. Okay, so this morning I would like to talk about cloud-optimized file formats. And I believe after me, Anshu will tell a little bit more about cloud-optimized file formats, or at least a specific subset. So this might even be a small presentation, and we can go to coffee even sooner. Well, this is not needed because Jao gave me a fantastic introduction. So I use a lot of data in my research and in my daily work, and I think that's a common pattern to all of us. I even think that this is probably the reason why I started using Julia in the first place. You encounter a data set that's so big that you cannot process it anymore with Python or R, and you seek something new. And this is common. So spatial data and data in general, we collect way more data every day, and it only grows in size. So we get more nice remote sensing missions, right? And those satellites collect more bands. They have more spatial frequencies. They do so at a higher resolution. And if you're lucky, they have a higher revisit time, or they have a broader swath width. And it grows and grows and grows. And it becomes harder and harder to actually analyze that data, especially like you would do it maybe in the past, just on your local laptop. So for my own research, I'm using ISAT2 data, and maybe Alex will tell us about ISAT2 later today. But ISAT2 data, if I want to analyze not even the raw data, but the process data that's related to latitude, longitude, and elevation, it's growing to roughly 1 petabyte in size. And I cannot handle that on my laptop. I wish. I cannot handle that, I think, on the computational cluster of my research institute. I think it would be even hard to do it on the computational cluster of my university. So basically, we have so much data, but it's very hard to use. So the solution that's nowadays chosen also by data providers like NASA is put everything in the cloud. Because basically only the big cloud providers have the capability to store a petabyte of data without any issues. And that creates a problem for me, right? Because suddenly it's at a cloud provider, that costs me money. I need to access it there, and this is the way of earning money of those cloud providers, right? You want to calculate where your data is, so I need to have some computing costs at Amazon if my data is in Amazon. So you get some sort of lock-in. And very specifically, you get the problem of how can I download and analyze a single subset of this huge data set, right? Because I'm not interested in the whole world, I want to download this tiny, nice island, right? And I only want to do this for the past year and not the past 20 years. So the question is, with all that immense data stored somewhere remotely, not locally, how do I get something that is of interest to me? And how can I do that in an automated, fast, and, well, hopefully cheap manner? So, subsetting, and I think you all know subsetting. You've probably used it. We've seen Tyler. It tells things at different zoom levels, so that's subsetting. I've used many services like GeoServer, MapServer, and that's basically you request a subset in a specific coordinate reference system from a service. And it does that stuff on the fly for you. But it's very expensive to actually run a service like that, right? There needs to be a computer up in the cloud, it needs to be maintained. There's a lot of bandwidth involved, and it can be misused. I'm happy to put a GeoServer there for a colleague of mine, but if I put it publicly and I put a link here in the presentation and all of you start clicking that link, that costs me money. So you don't run too much services on petabyte data sets, or at least not publicly. You probably need to get access, registration, you need to maintain it, and there are probably fair user limits. Like you can only download 50 tiles at a time and not all 50,000. The other cheap way, what you can do is don't run a service because that's expensive, just pre-tell the whole data set. So you cut, and this is very commonly done, I think, for all elevation data sets, about which I will talk later today. They're tell to 1 by 1 degrees. So then you just need to figure out which tiles you need to get. But the question is still, which tiles do I need to get? Do I need to merge all those tiles myself then? And if I want to do a global overview, a sort of summary, I don't need to zoom in completely, but then I would still download all the tiles. So you introduce a new problem, right? How to combine these. And some smarter minds than I have thought about this problem, and they come up with a very, very, very old solution. And that's called HTTP range request. And I'm talking about the solution first, and then introducing actually how it solves stuff. So this is plain old HTTP, basically how you browse the internet. And what it allows you to do is request a subset instead of the whole file. So if you visit a website, you're basically doing an HTTP request. So do it on your mobile phone. If you download a website, it's the HTML file or something. And it's a download of that file, and your browser interprets that. But you can also request a small subset. And the fun thing is, this has been supported by the HTTP protocol all the way since the beginning, as far as I'm aware. So it's built into all major tools. Your web browser on your mobile phone can do this. Every client on Linux, on Windows, does this. which is great because there's nothing new to implement. This is already there. It should work. We only need to make it basically spatial and fit for our purposes. So I can show you this, I hope. Yep. Is this big enough for you? I'll make it bigger. So we have the HTTP package in Julia. We can do an HTTP get. So this is how you would download an image, right? It's a bit low. This is a cat image. I mean, this is the internet, right? I don't need to time it, but essentially, I need to wait a bit because, well, I don't have internet. Crap. Okay, there goes the demo and my other demo. Okay, it worked. It worked. So what you see, you did an HTTP request, you get something back, it says okay, and the important thing is that underneath here I have a, what is it? Yeah, thanks. Not too big of an image, right? But what you can do with a client like this, you can also say, I do the same response, request, but I add a header there. So you pass a dictionary and the header says range, and I only want the bytes from 0 to, well, basically the first kilobyte. Kilobyte? Oh. That's how you do it. It's faster. You get a different message back. It says partial content. And I only received the first 1024 bytes. This probably uses curl in the background, might be zero indexed, but those are rather details I do not go into here. But it would be good to check if you implement something like this yourself, yes. So we can use this because every major file server, if you have a file on Amazon S3, or on other buckets, or just on a plain web server, you can use this to download a subset of your spatial data file. So problem solved, right? So back to the presentation. But we have a problem, right? Because this is like a vector of bytes. It's not spatial at all. We need to know where stuff is at. So which subset do we actually need to download? If I have a tile of the globe, and I only want Tercera Island, which bytes do I need? And more importantly, is, let's say, Tercera Island in that whole big file, is it actually somewhere contained in a small subset? Or is it actually there's a byte at the beginning of Tercera Island and there's a byte at the end of Tercera Island, and I need to combine all these small patches because that sort of destroys the purpose. And then the last problem is still, is there some way for me to get a global overview of everything? Or do I still need to download the whole file? Yeah.
I'm wondering, maybe there's a good reason there's not listed here, but I guess what kind of file is it?
I'll come back to that in a few slides. Because indeed, these answers that I will give to these questions, some files are automatically compatible, and some file formats definitely are not. So cloud-optimized file formats, it's a specific subset of all the existing formats. But let's not run ahead. So the answers to these questions would be, I sort of need a spatial index, right? I want to know which bytes correspond to which area of interest. And if I have a spatial index for my raster file or my vector geometry, I need to be able to download that easily. So that metadata should be somewhere probably at the beginning of the file, not too big. So if I do that HTTP range request, I always get all the required metadata directly, probably in a single request, because that's the cheapest, fastest, and easiest. So we need spatial indexing, and I think as the question already, the question that was asked on which file formats are compatible, this already precludes some file formats. Then the second question is, where is my area of interest? It should be in a single range. So we need some, I call it spatial coherence. That's from a paper of Isenberg, but we can call it dimensional coherence, because I think Anshul will later talk about more dimension than just the spatial dimension. So we need some chunking or tiling in 2D, right? So this is what it talks about. If you have the byte vector that you download with HTTP, ideally, if I have my whole data set in an X and Y dimension, and I have that green area of interest there in the middle, that should correspond to a single range in my byte vector, hopefully. The more ranges I have there, the worse it will get. So this would be good, right? This is coherence. And this would be bad. If I have a second area of interest, then I need to make multiple requests over large ranges of the file. So this means that your file format has to have a way of chunking data or internal tiling. And also, that should be supported by the spatial index again. And then to answer the last question, can I get a global overview? Ideally, there are summaries in such a file format. And then I'm thinking about vector data, because it could be a summary of attributes, like if you have an attribute, or intensity or something with the geometry, you could supply the mean intensity or the range of intensities captured in such a data set. And for raster data sets, you're thinking about overviews, right? Those would be pyramids, like Felix showed us yesterday. And with these questions answered, we basically can define what a cloud-optimized file format would look like. And that enables low latency. It enables operating at scale, because you could parallelize many of these requests. It's quite flexible, and it should be the most cost-effective solution when data is stored in the cloud. So we need metadata with the spatial index, some tiling or chunking for spatial coherence, and we can include some overviews. So this is a nice picture from guidecloudnative.geo.org. It's a cool website. You can read all about cloud-optimized file formats. And this is roughly how a cloud-optimized GeoTIFF looks like. All the metadata in the beginning, and all the metadata will tell you which files there are, which overviews they have, and the extents. So you can actually download the stuff, only the stuff that you want. Now, given all these requirements, which files are actually, well, fit for purpose? And I'm familiar with shapefiles, with geopackages, with ASCII rasters and GeoTIFFs. I'm just listing 4 more formats here. There are many more. I crossed through shapefile because I don't think we should be using shapefile, whether cloud optimized or not. Use geopackage or other file formats I will introduce. But all of these file formats are not cloud optimized, right? You can put this in the cloud, and you probably have to download the whole thing. Otherwise, you don't know which parts are of interest for you. You just have to download everything. So we come to this nice picture, also from the website. And we basically see that in traditional file formats, you have many, and in the cloud-optimized file format, there are a bit less. But there's flat GeoBuff, there's GeoParquet, and some file formats like LAS, which is for elevation point clouds, there are cloud-optimized variants of that file format. So there's COPSI, cloud-optimized point cloud. There's HDF5, which has no cloud-optimized version. There's NetCDF, also not really. GRIP, and then GeoTIFF at the bottom. And GeoTIFF again has a variant that can be cloud optimized, because basically the file format of TIFF, which had an extension to be GeoTIFF, can again be extended to be cloud optimized, because that file format allows for metadata at the beginning and internal chunking and tiling. And you see Kerching here on the right-hand side with reference files. I won't go into that. That's basically a way to use traditional file formats in a sort of cloud-optimized manner, and Anshul will tell you all about that in the next lecture after the coffee break. And I want to go slightly deeper into these two file variants that you have here? No, I don't. I have a slide about a demo. Do I dare do that with the spotty internet connection? Well, let me try. So this is the EU DEM by Hengel, who basically combine a lot of remote sensing data, a bit of machine learning, I believe, to produce a DTM model for continental Europe. And he very friendly of him, put it online in a publicly accessible location. So normally this is, well, stupid is a harsh word, but normally this can cost you a lot of money, right? Because they could be paying for the bandwidth, otherwise they could be sponsored. But someone has to pay some bandwidth costs there. But this is a cloud optimized GeoTIFF. So if you want to download this is 10 gigabytes. I don't want to do that. Please don't do that here as well, because it will destroy this internet connection. But we can, let's see if we can open this in QGIS. Because QuantumGIS nowadays is actually, well, it's aware of cloud optimized file formats. I'm sorry, it's very hard, I believe, to get QGIS to be bigger. So I believe this is fully not readable. Anyway, I'm opening a new, adding a new layer here, a raster layer. So normally that starts with file, and if I choose file protocol HTTPS or cloud, I can actually have a list here of cloud providers, a drop-down. And please test this yourself. And then underneath the HTTP, I can put down the link I just showed you in the presentation, and then just click add. It seems I have internet connection, so let's see. So there you go. I did not download 10 gigabytes in that few seconds, right? It only downloaded the metadata at the beginning of the file, and from that metadata, it could infer that there is actually an overview of the whole file, probably only a few MB. It downloaded that, and that's what displayed here. And only if you now zoom, and I'm a bit hesitant to do that. Well, actually, I think the Azores are in here. Those weird pixels on the left-hand side. So this sort of worked, right? You zoomed in, it downloaded a new ATEL, probably at the highest zoom resolution. And it again only downloaded the specific subset of the Azores for me. I still did not download the whole 10 gigabytes. This was probably another MB or so. So that's how basically how QGIS uses cloud optimized file formats. And this is lovely. And this is basically the whole point. We can stop here. I think I have one more slide. So the last file format and the GeoTIFF file format, they can be reused. And reusing file formats is a great way of driving adoption, right? Because otherwise, you're saying, look, I have this fancy new cloud optimized file format. Everyone should switch to my new format. And I have to start evangelize about that and convince people, and I have to convince all major software, GIS software, to implement that new file format, and it will be a pain. Because, like I said, we should not use shapefile, but shapefile is still out there. It probably will still be out there in a few years. And actually converting to GeoPackage, which is the standard, has been standardized and implemented, is still ongoing and very slow. So if you can reuse an existing file format in a backwards compatible manner, I think that's the way of the least friction to get people to use cloud optimized stuff. So we have two famous examples of that are COG and COPSI. Forgive my pronunciation of that. But basically that's cloud optimized GeoTIFF. So it's a normal GeoTIFF, but tiled and metadata in such a way that's cloud optimized. And a cloud optimized point cloud is just a LAS file. And again, LAS files had already metadata in the beginning and some extensions at the end where with an exact offset. So it could be, there could be a spatial index stored in there, and then it became cloud optimized. And these two file formats have seen the biggest adoption by major operators, data providers. So I think that the US elevation data set, 3DAB, that's being collected, that's now available in CUPC at, I think, multiple cloud providers. And cloud-optimized GeoTIFF has been adopted together with Stack, and hopefully Anshu will tell you about Stack, by Planet and many satellite operators. And that's just using the existing file formats and slightly modifying them. And GDAL has support for creating such files. And if your software is not cloud optimized aware, it will just stupidly download the whole file as it always did, but it will still work. So you don't incur a penalty by making your file cloud optimized. So that said, if you're using GeoTIFFs, just make it cloud optimized always by default, unless you have a very good reason not to. So how does this actually work in Julia? Because this is actually JuliaEO, and I haven't mentioned it once. I'd say cloud optimized is still quite new and can be limited. Don't want to bash my own efforts and other efforts there. We can read most or all of these file formats. So COG, GeoParquet, and half of those are native implementations. But the actual subsetting support for only downloading a small area of interest of such a file, that can be streamlined. It's often possible, but you need to have specific keyword options or provide a specific file string. So that can be a bit of a pain. We should make a nice cloud-optimized guide out of that. For example, you can read web addresses, like the TIFF I just showed you in QuantumGIS using GDAL, and that will work in geodata frames. It will work in rasters using the prefix VSI curl, which is a virtual file system from GDAL. But people just want to put in the HTTP address. They don't want to know about prefixes. Those are implementation details, and we should abstract. Oh, good. Good rasters. Okay. Geodata frame should do that for you. And it might this week. And then there's Flat GeoBuff and GeoArrow, and if you use GDAL, there are fallback options, and there are native implementations that are not finished. So probably you can read some of these file formats, but not write them fully or correctly. Also because I'm still working on that, but I'm happy to have other maintainers help with that. And then the reference approach for Stack, Zar, Kerchunk, and all those file formats, that's the next lecture. And with that, I like to conclude. So for more info, please check these two websites. This is guidecloudnativegeo.org. This has all the information you probably want to know about this, and this lecture is like a small summary of that website. And there's Cloud Optimized GeoTIFF, so gogeo.org, which is specific to Cloud Optimized GeoTIFF. And that's it. Any questions? Ooh, multiple questions. Okay, Felix, you go first.
So you said that we could use cloud optimized. Is there any reason why we should not use cloud optimized versions of GeoTIFF or us?
There is one, well, not minor drawback, and that is that you include overviews by default. What? Alex is shaking no, but I think Cloud Optimized will put overviews in your data set, so it means that your data set will grow with 1/3. So 33% increase of your file size, which is a cost to pay, but it's very useful because yeah, I'm already doing that because basically I want my larger GeoTIFFs to basically be opened instantly instead of waiting for rendering all the time. But that's the major cost, and there might be some exclusions of compression options that you cannot use, right? There's probably a fixed tiling or, well, assumed tile size, but those are nitpicks.
I can answer this one in detail. Yeah, there's a fixed tile size, so you have to have square tiles for COG.
Right.
There's also GDAL has moved to using COG as the default for TIFFs, but it actually has to do a copy for COG where it does for a standard TIFF.
Right.
So we'll make a TIFF and then copy it to a COG. So there's like more steps, which means more RAM and more disk space.
And it's slower to write. Yeah. Okay, so there's a small penalty in terms of performance and file size, but I'd say that's worth it. Yeah.
I'm wondering what really defines the file format to be cloud optimized. Because you mentioned overview, but ZAR format doesn't have overview as far as I know. So what really makes it cloud
Yeah.
you have a standard NetSCF file, you can just, you can just download subset of file or subset of the file. So,
But you have to know which subset you want to download, right? And you don't know that.
you can use it for the header, right? So you first download, you make your range request in the header,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can compute all files of all offsets to your station.
I believe that can work in some of the cases. I believe it's also by some compression options. It can be obfuscated a little bit, and a lot of that will depend on the internal chunking of the NetCDF, whether that will work nicely or not. If everything is interleaved and compressed, figuring out which subset to actually download of your specific variable becomes very hard. But yeah, that. And regarding your first question about overviews, I put it in gray because I think it's nice to have. It wouldn't be fully required, but I think it's useful to have global overviews or global summaries to some extent. Any other questions? Yeah?
Yeah, something similar, kind of about CSV files. I mean, the reality of my life is I cannot turn around and ask people to format their things. That's not happening. And I have to deal with what I got. I think most people are in that situation, so you don't have the choice. So think about someday, can I use something like this to say, grab the header of a CSV file or the NetCDF file header? Is there like a practical way to do that?
I think, so the question is about CSV files and other, standard and older formats, and then how to make them cloud optimized. I think the carrier chunk option that Anshu will talk about later could theoretically do that. And you're basically storing the metadata needed to, with all the offsets basically, you're storing that externally in some sort of index. So it could be done, but I also say it becomes slightly convoluted, and I don't think CSV is a good fit or will work for that at all. Because the header could be known in terms of offset, but your rows are essentially, they have variable row sizes, right? Because you could put a string in one of the rows, and then suddenly that row is longer than the other ones in terms of bytes. So you need to have the offsets for all rows, and that index will grow hugely. So I don't think CSV could be used in such a manner. But there are cheats like this. I think that the author of JITO, or one of the authors of JITO, he sort of jokingly, or not jokingly, we still don't know, I'd say, because not many people took him seriously or were a bit despairing. I think he made cloud-optimized shapefile or something by zipping the whole thing and adding metadata. He made that sort of work, I believe. I should look into it. I sort of don't want to look into it, but there's a way to hack things, let's say. Okay. Oh, still more questions. Alex, yeah.
So there's like an infinite number of vector formats.
Yeah.
And I'm not clearly sure why. Do you see most of those being retired? I'm wondering who's going to win this vector format game?
Well, shapefile, obviously.
Yeah,
No. So the question is about so many file formats and which one will win. And I can't really say. It's so domain specific. I mean, we're here doing open source stuff. At my research institute, we're doing open source stuff. At university, you're probably also walking in a more progressive way of trying to adopt and even research new file formats. So in that sense, I see the adoption of JuliaEO and GeoParquet to some extent, but I think JuliaEO might be taking off more even than that. That seems sensible. But then if you're just any company and you need, you only implement, let's say, OGC standards, I'm not actually sure. Well, cloud optimized GeoTIFF might be OGC standards, but I'm not sure about which cloud optimized vector formats are actually standardized to some extent, and which ones are actually supported by Esri, which of course will be a major influence.
I was just going to say that HDF5 actually can be cloud optimized. It's just very obscure.
Right, yeah. I think most formats could be in some way cloud optimized, but probably the default settings by which they're released or put on the web makes it very hard.
The early day of internet, when you download an image, you see first saw a blurry image and then more and more detail.
Oh, the progressive JPEG or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was really quite nifty format.
Yeah.
But I think also in our domain, we sometimes do not need to have full resolution. Or, as you said, new video is always very useful to have. So, others with file format also working on this idea. So, storing data, such as also pyramid scheme data, storing data at low resolution, and then just higher resolution. And then when you download the data, you can use some HTTP range request to only download up to the resolution you need and only the area.
Well, that's basically cloud optimized UTIF, right? That's the demo of QGIS. It's basically that progressive JPEG.
Okay, so they are already also use.
So yeah, those overviews, they are of smaller resolution because you don't need the full resolution to display it. So I think that's out there. It's easier to do for rasters, the pyramids. But the sad thing, it's mostly used for visualization, right? Because it's directly useful for visualization because well, like the progressive render JPEG, it displays instantly, right? And you have a fixed resolution of your screen, so it's very easy to compute which, let's say, pyramid level you need. We should, but we don't, also do similar things for actual computations. This also would be huge cost savings in terms of performance, CO2 emissions, and all of that, because I think if you want to do global calculation, you don't need to do the full resolution, right? You could do it on a lower resolution. But I don't think many of our models or other software can actually handle that. They will always go for the full data and calculate on that. And that's actually where, and these discussions I've had before, also at the Open GeoHub Summer School, we as open source developers could actually play a role in there. But it means that in our algorithms where you say, now take the mean or have this map window operation, you can actually do that as easily on an overview or on another tile level. So I'm not sure, maybe a question to Rafael, how easy is it to get, let's say, the low resolution overview of a TIFF?
Yeah, Websters doesn't make that very easy at the moment. I think there's a few more problems like AS checkers and all that some of the companies. It talks a lot about problem with intensive and expensive variables. So you can't just take the mean of a lower resolution variable and into its classes, and other classes. So there's lots of, you need to know the kind of variable, like anything to do with temperature.
used it yet.
Excuse me. So we'll be having our coffee break right now. For everyone watching online, we'll be back in 20 minutes, just like according to our schedule. Thank you.